It's funny, isn't it? You see a company making a splash, getting good press, and you think, success story, right? I mean, BluSmart felt like that for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Stepping into the ride-hailing game,
Mm-hmm.
but with a twist, a sustainable angle.
Right.
All EVs
Yeah.
really caught your eye as something, well, different.
Absolutely. The whole narrative around BluSmart was really powerful from the get-go, tapped into that rising concern for the environment, offered a real alternative
Hmm.
in a market that was, well, it was just gas guzzlers everywhere, right?
Yeah.
They presented themselves as like the future of city transport.
Exactly. And it wasn't all talk either.
Right.
They were racking up some serious investments.
Yeah.
We're talking big names, BP Ventures, Mayfield India Fund, even a climate finance firm from Zurich. They put in like $24 million
Wow.
just about a year ago.
That's serious money.
That kind of backing, it makes you pay attention. Things seem to be really rolling.
It really does. That level of investor confidence, it tells you something, suggests the market saw huge potential in BluSmart's vision and how they were doing things, at least back then. Investors don't just throw money around for no reason.
Well, that's where our deep dive takes us today.
Yep.
We're looking at this Business Standard FinShots article from March 31st, 2025. And, well, the headline's a bit of a punch in the gut.
Oh.
BluSmart is knee-deep in trouble.
Ah.
It even says those guys, they mostly work on a system where drivers own or, finance their own cars.
Right.
That keeps a huge chunk of financial burden off their shoulders.
Right.
They're more like a middleman connecting riders and drivers.
It's a platform play, yeah, connecting those two sides.
Exactly.
BluSmart, though, they went a different route. They decided to lease their whole fleet of EVs.
Okay.
This was central to their whole image, and their control over the cars themselves, the type, the quality.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to make sure everyone had that consistent EV experience.
Which sounds good, on paper at least.
Yeah.
A standardized all-electric fleet.
Right. But the article points out the risk there.
Yeah.
It made them super dependent on those leasing costs.
Yeah.
And even more importantly, on the leasing companies actually sticking around.
Right.
It's a whole different ballgame compared to that platform model.
It is. And if the cost of leasing those EVs suddenly shot up, or if those leasing companies just decide to pull out BluSmart's whole operation, you could just crumble.
Yeah, that dependence, it created a vulnerability that Ola and Uber just don't have, right?
Yeah.
Because for them, the risk of owning the car, it's on the driver.
Exactly. And this leads us to a really interesting and maybe a bit shady connection the article brings up.
Okay.
The relationship with Gensol Engineering.
Gensol.
Now, some people might not know, but Gensol is a public company. They do solar energy and, you guessed it, EV leasing.
Huh.
And get this, the founder of both Gensol and BluSmart.
Yeah.
It's the same guy, Anmol Singh Jaggi.
Oh,
That raises some eyebrows.
it definitely does, yeah. Having the same person at the helm of both companies, it immediately makes you think about corporate governance.
Right.
How's this whole thing actually being run? Is it in the best interest of everyone involved? The shareholders and all that. The article goes on to explain how Gensol got these government-backed loans from IREDA,
I read it.
the Indian Renewable Energy Development Agency, and those loans were specifically for buying EVs.
Okay.
A lot of EVs.
And here's where it gets juicy. The article claims most of those EVs ended up in BluSmart's fleet.
Really?
So we're talking about government money meant for Gensol,
Yeah.
indirectly fueling BluSmart's expansion. And apparently IREDA knew about it.
Wow, that's...
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Where was all that money really going?
It does. You've got a public company, Gensol, and a private one, BluSmart, both under the same founder, and money's flowing between them.
Right.
It screams conflict of interest.
Yeah.
The article even mentions that Gensol's annual report for FY24, it showed contracts worth over 148 crores with BluSmart's subsidiaries.
That's a lot.
It is, and it really highlights how deeply connected these two companies were financially.
So while BluSmart was out there, getting all this positive attention, the benefits, they weren't going directly to Gensol's public investors.
Right, because BluSmart was its own thing, a private entity.
Yeah.
And the article points out that Gensol wasn't exactly transparent about their dealings with BluSmart.
It's almost like the public company was propping up the private one.
It does seem that way.
Without any clear benefit to its own shareholders.
Yeah.
It makes you ask whose interests were really being served here.
Exactly. And even though BluSmart insisted that all their deals were fair and independent, done at arm's length, and approved by the board, The fact that they were so closely tied,
Right.
it just naturally raises questions about whether Gensol's public shareholders were really getting a fair shake.
Absolutely. And then things took a turn for the worse
Oh,
with Gensol's finances.
okay.
The article lays it out, some pretty scary numbers.
Uh-oh.
By the end of 2024, they had, get this, 470 crores in unpaid loans to IRETA.
Whoa, that's a ton of debt.
It is, and the consequences were rough. Credit rating agencies like CARE and IRE, they downgraded Gensol's debt to default status.
Oof, that's a bad sign.
They basically said they didn't think Gensol could pay back their loans, and they even accused them of hiding important financial details.
Not good.
No, and of course, Gensol's stock price tanked.
Yeah, investors don't like that kind of news.
They don't. So in a desperate attempt to get rid of some of that debt, Gensol made a tough call. They sold almost 3,000 of their EVs
Oh, wow.
to another company, Reflex Green Mobility.
Reflex.
Yeah, and this is where BluSmart becomes collateral damage, as the article puts it.
Okay.
A huge part of their fleet, the cars they need to operate,
Yeah.
they're suddenly owned by Reflex.
Right, so the problems at Gensol, they directly impacted BluSmart.
Exactly. Now, there is an agreement. Reflex is supposed to lease those EVs back to BluSmart for 5 years.
Okay.
But, and this is a big but,
Yeah.
the article says that Reflex has also hinted at maybe stopping those leases early
Oh.
and launching their own EV ride-hailing service.
So they could become a competitor.
Exactly. Talk about being stuck between a rock and a hard place.
That's a tough spot for BluSmart.
It is, and it gets even trickier.
How so?
Reflex, they already have a partnership with Uber Green.
Really?
Yeah, they're planning to put 1,000 electric cabs on the road by 2026.
Okay. So if Reflex has to pick who gets priority with their fleet,
Yeah,
BluSmart might not be the top choice.
they might go with Uber, the bigger player.
It makes sense.
It does, and you know what this all means? BluSmart's reliance on Gensol in the beginning for their fleet and financing,
Right.
it's come back to bite them.
Yeah, that lifeline's gone now, and they have to figure out how to get and maintain a huge EV fleet all on their own, and they might even have to compete with the company they're currently relying on.
And this brings us to their next big problem,
What's that?
funding.
No.
With Gensol out of the picture, BluSmart is reportedly struggling to raise money.
Yeah, I can see why investors might be hesitant now.
They are, and this is on top of the losses they've already piled up, 215 crores in FY23.
That's a lot.
It is, and there are reports of bad customer service, which doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
No, it doesn't. It all creates this, like, downward spiral.
Right.
Financial problems affect service, bad service drives away customers, less revenue makes it even harder to get funding.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is.
Now, the article does say that BluSmart claims they've diversified their leasing partnerships.
Oh,
Yeah, with companies like Oryx, Kinto, and Mahindra.
that's good.
It is. But with Reflex potentially controlling so much of their fleet,
Right.
the big question is, and the article asks it directly, can BluSmart really stand on its own 2 feet, or was it always just a matter of time?
Yeah, you have to wonder if their success was more about Gensol than anything else.
That's the million-dollar question.
It is. Diversifying their leasing partners is a good move, but the whole Reflex situation and the instability at Gensol, it throws a huge wrench in things.
It does. And, you know, the article also brings up a bigger point, a lesson for all entrepreneurs.
What's that?
They reference this guy, Sundeed Khanna from Mint. He calls the whole Gensol BluSmart saga a cautionary tale of spreading too thin.
Diversifying into related businesses, that can be a smart move.
Yeah.
When you jump into completely unrelated sectors, that's where the danger lies.
Right, you need different skills, different strategies, and it could really stretch your team.
Exactly. You look at Anmol Singhjagi, he was trying to manage 2 massive businesses, EV leasing with Gensol and ride-hailing with BluSmart.
Both needing tons of capital.
Yeah, the article suggests that might have been too much to handle effectively.
Right, and the lesson here, as the article puts it, is that diversification works best when you stay within your circle of competence. Going outside that circle, it can lead to, and I'm quoting here, governance laxes, financial mismanagement, and ultimately a house of cards waiting to collapse.
Strong statement.
It is, and I think it's a good reminder for anyone in business.
Focus on what you know.
Exactly. But, you know, the article does acknowledge that this isn't a universal rule.
Right.
There are companies that have successfully diversified across very different industries.
Yeah.
But in this case, with Gensol and BluSmart,
Yeah.
that close connection, It seems to have been a major contributor to the mess they're in.
It blurred the lines.
It did. And there's this crucial update at the end of the article.
Oh.
It says, and this is speculation, but that Refex and Gensol have called off their deal, where Refex was going to buy those 2,997 electric vehicles from Gensol.
Wow, that changes things.
It does, right?
Yeah.
If Refex isn't taking over those EVs, their control over BluSmart's fleet might not be as strong as we thought.
It throws a whole new light on their influence.
Exactly. It might not be as easy for them to just stop the leases and start competing with BluSmart.
Right.
But, even with this change,
Yeah.
Gensol's debt and BluSmart's funding problems,
They haven't gone away.
they haven't. And you know what? The article doesn't say Gensol is guilty of anything.
Right.
They could still be cleared of any wrongdoing.
Yeah.
But the damage is done. Their stock has plummeted. BluSmart is struggling. Investors are nervous.
It's a tough situation.
It is. I think this whole story really shows how complicated it is to build a business,
Yeah.
especially one that needs so much money, like in the EV world.
It's a complex landscape.
It is. All these connections, funding strategies, corporate governance, it can all have huge consequences, as we've seen.
Absolutely. So what are the big takeaways here for our listeners? I think the BluSmart story is a warning about getting too entangled with other businesses,
Right.
especially when one's public and the other's private.
And being transparent about your finances.
Yeah, and having a solid fund model that doesn't rely on just one partner.
Especially when you're growing that fast.
It is. And that point about expanding too quickly into areas you don't know, that's something to remember.
It is. I think this deep dive gave us a much clearer picture of what's going on with BluSmart.
It did. We went beyond those initial headlines to really see how complex things are, the money, the decisions.
It all matters.
It does. It can make or break a company.
And now, for our final thought.
Okay.
We've talked about all these challenges, the connections, the funding, the potential competition, the whole Refex deal.
Right.
What do you think needs to happen for EV ride-hailing to really take off?
Interesting question.
For it to be successful in the long run,
Yeah,
think about funding, charging infrastructure,
that's key.
and how companies need to be creative with their business models.
It's a constantly changing industry.
It is. So how do companies adapt?
It's a question that gets to the core of building a strong and resilient business.
Absolutely.
And I think the BluSmart story and everything happening in the EV world, it's going to offer a lot of valuable lessons for everyone involved. Entrepreneurs, investors, anyone interested in the future of transportation.
It has given us a lot to think about.
It has.
Thanks for joining us as we unpack this whole complicated situation.
It was a pleasure.
And the story's not over yet.
Right. We'll be watching closely to see what happens next.
We will. It's a fascinating time for EV mobility.
It is.
So, until next time, keep those wheels turning.
Stay charged up.